Alberta's alert enforcement team says it has made one of the biggest drug busts in provincial history. A cross-border case they call Project Cerberus.
At 4 o'clock in the morning in Chicago, amidst the bone-chilling cold and the eerie stillness of the night, an unseen storm is about to break. In a heartbeat, 1,600 federal agents spring into action, launching Operation Steel Flood with precision, targeting 800 locations simultaneously. Their adversaries, however, are not ordinary criminals, but a ruthless paramilitary group that has covertly turned America's critical freight train network into a deadly weapon. What dark secrets lie beneath those seemingly innocent cargo containers? Brace yourself as we take you through 3 harrowing hours of the largest raid in history, where the line between life and death is measured in mere seconds. Get down, now, right side is clear, hands where I can see them. The community is under siege as illegal drug use spreads like wildfire throughout Chicago. At 4 in the morning, the city is cloaked in bone-chilling darkness. In an instant, 1,600 federal agents initiate a surprise strike across 20 locations, targeting 800 objectives in a carefully orchestrated operation. But this is no ordinary street gang. It is the most ruthless paramilitary group from Mexico, which has quietly turned Chicago into a key hub for its sprawling criminal empire. They smuggle military-grade weapons and flood the Midwest with fentanyl, taking the lives of thousands of Americans through the very freight trains that should have been carrying goods. Operation Steel Flood, the largest raid in the city's history, is about to ignite. The next 3 hours will leave you on the edge of your seat as intense developments unfold. At 4 in the morning in Chicago, 1,600 federal agents are deployed across 20 locations with 800 targets in their sights. The city is about to witness the most monumental operation it has ever seen. As the countdown hits 0, forces are deployed. Watch as they spring into action. Operation Steel Flood has begun. 1,600 agents flood into the city to execute the largest raid Chicago has ever known, targeting the heavily fortified stronghold of the notorious organized crime group, Los Zetas. Chicago, a city defined by its constant hustle and bustle, is on the verge of a monumental shock. The railroads, the sprawling warehouses, and the ceaseless flow of goods fuel the heartbeat of the entire Midwest. Yet beneath this unyielding motion, federal agents began to uncover something insidious taking root, something organized, something profoundly dangerous. The Los Zetas group had quietly infiltrated Chicago, mirroring their stealthy spread across Mexico. Methodical, precise, and military in nature. They are not just another street gang battling for control of a few blocks. They are a paramilitary force made up of elite ex-soldiers infamous for their discipline and lethal tactics. The FBI has gone as far as to label them a national security threat, recognizing them as more than just a drug cartel. The Los Zetas operations in Chicago were intricately linked to the city's vast logistics network, with heavy weaponry moving through cargo ports before resurfacing in global conflict zones. Money was funneled through transportation companies, while illicit substances, exceptionally pure methamphetamine, heroin, and vast quantities of fentanyl, flowed through the industrial corridors into the heart of the Midwest. For months, investigators were left piecing together scattered fragments. Suspicious containers, encrypted messages, and unpredictable skirmishes near desolate lots, but no clear targets. That is, until a confidential informant came forward. A confidential informant revealed a shipment of military-grade rifles passing through a warehouse in the southern part of the city. These weren't just ordinary handguns, they were weapons designed for combat, intended for far more dangerous purposes. As soon as the intelligence reached the ICE Homeland Security Investigations Unit, the atmosphere in the Chicago field office shifted. Senior agents immediately recognized the ominous pattern. Military rifles, high-level narcotics, and hidden warehouses pointed to only one possibility. The Los Zetas group had embedded itself deeper into Chicago's criminal underworld than anyone had imagined. But ICE couldn't tackle this alone. Within days, the case was escalated to a joint interagency task force, bringing in experts from multiple agencies to confront the growing threat. The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force was the first to step in, not because of the narcotics problem, but because Los Zetas operated with insurgency-style tactics. Complex command structures, couriers using coded language, and a relentless campaign of intimidation that targeted entire neighborhoods. Next, the ATF joined the effort, bringing their expertise in tracing weapons that had disappeared into global conflicts. The Chicago Police Department's Gang Intelligence Unit provided crucial street-level insights, safe houses, stash locations, and subtle shifts in territory that federal databases could not detect. Over the span of 3 years, the investigation grew into a sprawling operation, like a shadow creeping beneath the city's surface. Surveillance teams rotated through rail yards and transportation hubs, keeping a watchful eye on every movement, inching closer to uncovering the full scope of the operation. Undercover agents embedded themselves in repair shops and warehouses suspected to be storage points for Los Zetas shipments. Listening devices picked up cryptic phrases like long tools, cold engines, and night packages, which were later deciphered as code for rifles, drug shipments, and cash. ATF ballistics experts soon confirmed the chilling truth. Some of the rifles recovered from international conflict zones had originated from Illinois, purchased through straw buyers, and ultimately routed to Los Zetas. Meanwhile, DEA chemists analyzed narcotics seized from routine traffic stops across the state, and the purity was undeniable, showing that the drugs flooding the streets were of an exceptionally lethal quality. This was no ordinary drug operation, it was Los Zetas grade product, manufactured in industrial-scale facilities. What had started with a single informant had evolved into a comprehensive portrait of an organization that had entrenched itself deep within Chicago's network of warehouses. By the end of 2024, federal prosecutors had reviewed the overwhelming evidence and authorized an unprecedented takedown. As winter settled in, every agency involved understood the magnitude of what they were up against. Los Zetas hadn't just gained a foothold in Chicago, they had established a fully operational command center. The network was fortified with secure warehouses, armed guards, and a sophisticated delivery system that was adept at slipping through the cracks of even the most stringent surveillance efforts. Federal prosecutors determined the moment to strike had arrived. The operation was codenamed Steel Flood, symbolizing the wave of federal agents set to descend just before dawn. At a highly secure command center in the western part of the city, leaders from ICE, FBI, ATF, U.S. Marshal Service, Illinois State Police, and the Chicago Police Department gathered around a digital map covered in red dots. Each dot marked a key location tied to Los Zetas. Weapons caches, drug labs, stash houses, and 2 warehouses suspected to be the primary command centers. The stakes were high and the time for action had come. In total, 800 targets and 1,600 officers were assigned to the operation, a scale that rivaled some of the largest federal missions in U.S. history. At 4:42 in the morning, the first teams began their advance. Armored vehicles raced south along the empty highways, their engines cutting through the stillness. Helicopters hovered silently above the industrial corridors, their blades barely disturbing the cold air. Support teams took positions on rooftops near the southern rail yards, their eyes trained on key locations. Chicago remained dark, freezing and unnervingly quiet, an eerie calm before the storm. The raid officially kicked off at 4:58 when the first team stormed Warehouse 17 deep within the sprawling Winetorm cargo complex. The assault team advanced toward the reinforced steel door, every step deliberate and calculated. Before the breacher could swing the ram, the first muzzle flashes erupted from within. The occupants inside had reacted with precision. Gunfire shattered the silence of the empty lot. Short, controlled bursts, not the frantic spraying of amateurs. These were professionals. The federal agents quickly sought cover as the gunmen opened fire. Support teams on nearby rooftops quickly identified 2 shooters positioned behind stacked pallets. In a split second, 2 precise shots neutralized the threats. Flashbangs exploded, disorienting the remaining defenders, and the steel door swung open with a deafening metallic groan. The agents stormed in, their voices echoing with sharp, decisive commands. Inside, they encountered 3 Los Zetas members barricaded behind a forklift, continuing their resistance until the sheer number of agents flooded the building, compelling them to surrender. Meanwhile, across the city, similar scenes were unfolding in synchronized precision. At a warehouse near Cicero Avenue, one team cornered a group of armed security personnel attempting to escape in 2 pickup trucks. Before the vehicles could even attempt to flee, they were surrounded by armored units, effectively cutting off any chance of resistance. At a row house in South Chicago, the agents confronted a fortified stronghold, but the suspects immediately surrendered as soon as the door was breached. By 7:10 in the morning, the operation reached its apex. Hundreds had been detained and evidence was scattered everywhere. Illicit substances packed in industrial containers, ledgers, money counters, encrypted phones, logistics notebooks, and most crucially, irrefutable proof that Chicago had become the heart of the Los Zetas distribution network. As the dust settled, a chilling question remained. What do you think poses the greatest threat from the Los Zetas organization? Smuggling fentanyl through freight trains or trafficking military-grade weapons through fortified warehouses? The city had just witnessed its largest takedown of a criminal organization. As the raids concluded, federal agents moved to Phase 2 of Operation Steel Flood, turning the scene into legal evidence. Every warehouse, container, and communication device became a crucial part of the criminal network prosecutors had spent years unraveling. Inside Warehouse 17, where the first resistance occurred, agents worked with precision, marking spent shell casings with yellow triangles as the air remained tense. The forklift, covered in bullet marks, was sealed as evidence. Behind a false wall of stacked pallets, investigators found a cache of military-grade rifles, each with its serial number expertly erased. ATF experts quickly identified the rifles as matching those traced to foreign conflict zones. This was the first direct evidence that Chicago was not just a narcotics distribution hub, it was a key pipeline for weapons. At another location in the South, agents uncovered a fortified room that resembled an operations station. It was more than just a hideout. Maps of freight routes were pinned to the walls, with colored strings linking Texas ports to Illinois rail hubs. Encrypted devices were scattered across steel tables, still logged into a messaging channel bearing the Los Zetas emblem. This was no ordinary criminal den. It felt like a military-forward operating base. Just beneath the freight trains roaring through Chicago daily, tons of fentanyl and high-grade rifles were quietly flowing into the Midwest, unnoticed by the public. Meanwhile, at a house on Ashland Avenue, a secondary confrontation broke out. The U.S. Marshal Service team raided a suspected 2-story residence used for storing finances and illicit goods. As they entered, a mid-level Los Zetas commander tried to escape down the back stairs, putting up fierce resistance in the hallway. A deputy U.S. Marshal responded with precision, wounding the suspect in the leg to stop his escape. The remaining suspects immediately surrendered. Upstairs, agents uncovered barrels stuffed with cash and notebooks with torn pages, detailing payments and transportation schedules. Each piece of evidence revealed the full scale of the operation. A 3-tier military-style hierarchy, including weapon handlers, logistics teams within transportation companies, a finance division laundering money through commodity brokers, and a regional leader in Chicago reporting directly to Mexico. Federal prosecutors spent hours meticulously piecing together every detail. ATF experts matched dozens of rifles to seizures abroad, while the DEA confirmed that the narcotics seized in Chicago were traced to a single production network across the border. FBI analysts decrypted conversations outlining plans to expand distribution into Michigan, Wisconsin, and parts of Ohio. By the end of the weekend, the evidence had filled an entire federal warehouse. The charges were extensive, including conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, international weapons trafficking, illegal money laundering, and material support for a criminal enterprise. Some defendants faced exceptionally high mandatory minimum sentences. Others, particularly those tied to the weapons pipeline, faced life imprisonment. What had started as scattered intelligence fragments had evolved into a rock-solid case capable of dismantling a paramilitary organization operating at the heart of one of America's largest cities. Chicago had witnessed the battle. Now the city would watch the aftermath unfold. In the hours after Operation Steel Flood, Chicago fell into an eerie hush, the kind of silence that follows a storm no one knew was brewing until it passed. Police radios crackled endlessly, and federal convoys moved through the industrial corridors. Helicopters patrolled the southern skies, but for the first time in years, every movement was controlled and methodical, no longer dictated by Los Zetas. Yet the operation was far from over. Inside the command center, agents carefully monitored signals and drone footage from the remaining target areas. Not all Los Zetas members had been apprehended in the initial wave. Some had slipped into abandoned zones as soon as the first site was hit. Others tried to regroup, desperately clinging to their old operational patterns. They sought high ground, rooftops, vantage points, anywhere they could launch a counterattack or find an escape route. One such standoff erupted near the old grain silos along the Calumet River. An ICE ATF rapid response team detected movement on the upper floors of an abandoned factory. Thermal imaging pinpointed two armed suspects hiding behind old machinery. As the team advanced, the suspects opened fire from above, turning the situation into a highly dangerous confrontation. The agents quickly found cover and returned fire. The firefight lasted less than 40 seconds, but the tension was palpable. A stark reminder that Los Zetas would not surrender without a fight. Once the suspects were subdued, the final sweep began. Over the next 48 hours, federal agents meticulously cataloged everything still hidden. Basement stash compartments, fentanyl bundles bearing distinct stamps, cabinets filled with weapon parts and tactical gear, and ledgers detailing payments to drivers across 5 states. Chicago leaders held a joint press conference at City Hall. Standing united, federal, state, and local officials made it clear that this was not just a victory, it was a powerful warning. Los Zetas had tried to turn America's largest logistics hub into a fortress and had come perilously close to succeeding. In the hardest-hit neighborhoods, residents cautiously stepped out of their homes, watching federal convoys roll down streets that had once been gripped by fear. For years, residents had grown accustomed to the constant presence of unfamiliar vehicles in the dead of night, discreet handoffs near the docks, and the silent understanding that certain areas were no longer truly safe. Now, for the first time, there was a cautious sense that control was slowly being restored. But there were no celebrations. Chicago, like the federal commanders, knew the truth. The removal of hundreds of Los Zetas members had created a vacuum, and that vacuum could easily attract other groups. Smaller groups could rise to fill the void, and other international organizations might move in to claim the territory. Federal agencies committed to maintaining a long-term presence, deploying intelligence teams and patrol units to assist local forces. Community groups also stepped up, working to rebuild the neighborhoods hit hardest by crime. Youth programs, reintegration support, and real job creation efforts were launched to keep vulnerable young people from becoming the next targets for criminal groups. In the end, Operation Steel Flood did more than dismantle a criminal network. It exposed just how close Chicago had come to becoming a permanent hub in an international crime system. The battle was fought and the city prevailed. What happens next will determine whether this victory endures. Ultimately, Operation Steel Flood wasn't just a raid, it was a costly lesson, a stark reminder that even in America's largest, fastest-paced city, dangers can silently grow in the shadows of the very systems we depend on. Chicago has neutralized the immediate threat, but now the city must focus on maintaining long-term stability. The lesson from Chicago is clear. The greatest danger isn't always open conflict. It lies in the silence when an organization quietly exploits the very rail lines, highways, and warehouses the entire country depends on to build an illicit network. They don't need to draw attention to control their territory. Just a few unnoticed containers are enough. Every time you see a freight train moving or a convoy of trucks on the road, remember that constant vigilance is essential. Only through the vigilance of every citizen and seamless coordination among agencies can similar incidents be prevented in the future. This is not just the responsibility of law enforcement, it is the responsibility of all of us. Operation Steel Flood is concluded with hundreds of suspects in custody and massive quantities of dangerous evidence seized. Yet Chicago remains cautious, fully aware of the challenges that lie ahead. When one threat is eliminated, new risks must always be guarded against to prevent them from taking its place. The most important lesson for viewers is the need for multidimensional vigilance in modern society. Dangers don't only arise from open conflicts on the streets, but also from silent, systematic infiltration into essential infrastructure, rail lines, warehouses, and transportation networks. The Los Zetas organization has shown that by controlling logistics choke points, they can move tons of illicit substances and war-grade weapons without detection. The lesson is clear. The greatest threat to community security may be lurking in the shadows of the very systems we trust and rely on every day. Operation Steel Flood has ended, but the lesson from Chicago remains profoundly relevant. The greatest dangers often arise from silence, when an international organization quietly takes control of our essential logistics systems. We've won the battle, but the power vacuum could soon be filled. What do you think is most crucial for Chicago to secure lasting stability after this takedown? Is it sustained cooperation among law enforcement agencies or active community involvement? Share your thoughts in the comments below.